Bryant, it's busy times on Washington, D.C. and on Capitol Hill. The president just asked for something like $106 billion as supplemental for all the activities going on around the world, I think in Ukraine, in Israel, and beyond. Tell us about that package that the president asking Congress to approve.
Yeah, this is, as you noted, this $106 billion, that's a huge supplemental request. The most of it, roughly $61 billion, is economic and military aid for Ukraine. The DoD is about to run out of funding to continue supplying them with weapons, and I don't think they have funding any longer to backfill U.S. stockpiles of weapons we've already sent them. So that's a large part of this. The second thing, as we saw with the in the follow-up of the unfortunate massacre of Israelis in Gaza, they now want $14 billion to continue providing weapons, Iron Dome interceptors, and munitions for Israel. And for the past 2 weeks, of course, Israel has continued bombing Gaza. So that's what those munitions would go towards. And then that's the bulk of the package. And then there's a comparatively a small percentage for the Indo-Pacific, specifically about $3.4 billion to invest in the submarine industrial base for AUKUS to transfer nuclear submarines to Australia.
AUKUS is Australia, United States, and the UK?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a trilateral agreement where we send submarines to Australia as an interim capability, Virginia-class submarines. The industrial base is behind on our submarine production goals, so the intent of those funds is to give them more money to kind of bolster their infrastructure and workforce development. And then there's $2 billion in foreign military finance and military grants and loans for partners and allies in the Indo-Pacific, including Taiwan, to help arm them as well. But again, the bulk of this is for Ukraine and Israel.
Brian, the way I understand it is we send munitions to Ukraine from our stocks, and then we backfill the stocks from factories, from building these munitions, so that we have our own stocks and munitions that we can use for conflicts all over the world. And now those stocks are being used for Ukraine, a certain amount for Israel. How is the United States working to get those backfills ordered, and are they running into any kind of troubles?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I will say in the supplemental request that President Biden sent Congress last week, the White House noted that at least I think $50 billion of that is goes back here in the U.S. into our defense industrial base. So that is an argument President Biden is now explicitly making when he's pushing for Ukraine and Israel funding. Prior to that, for Ukraine, the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell had made that argument, but Biden wasn't making it so much. But when it comes to the industrial base, much of the aid we've sent Ukraine and Israel now so far, and actually Taiwan for that matter too, has been through Presidential Drawdown Authority, which, as you said, it goes from U.S. stockpiles. Of course, then it comes time for the U.S. to replenish those, which is where a lot of these funds are going. The thing about that, though, is we, as people have been following very closely since the COVID pandemic, we have quite a few industrial capacity constraints, so we can't, a lot of programs are slipping. We are having trouble quickly replenishing our munitions that we sent to Ukraine and now Israel. And when you have two active conflicts in Ukraine and Israel that we're arming, it makes you wonder if we can sustain a third conflict if something were to happen in the Indo-Pacific, of course.
And the industrial base, the defense industrial base, is definitely not immune from the supply chain issues that any other factory, any other kind of manufacturing sees. And with Ukraine being a significant sized conflict and Gaza just geographically being a smaller place, but it's still a significant area that's going to take a lot of munitions. If something happens with Taiwan, which itself is a small country, it would be attacked by China, which is an enormous country. Would we have enough munitions to kind of fill those three conflicts?
So great question. At the risk of prognosticating, I think most people would say right now the answer is no. I know that House China Committee a few months ago, they had their own tabletop exercises, these war game tabletop exercises, and they found out, I think, within a week or two of a conflict with China in the Indo-Pacific over Taiwan, we would run out of LRASMs, for instance, long-range anti-ship missiles, and other munitions. And other war games have over Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific have replicated similar results. So that alone would, start to drain our stockpiles, and that's not even factoring in the, what we're sending Ukraine, the additional munitions we'd like to send Ukraine and Israel, for that matter.
Bryant, you have a lot on your plate right now. Thanks for covering it, and thanks for having us over.
Yeah, thank you for having me.